Hi, I'm glad you made it to over to this channel. This is a channel that is devoted to wood turning, making really high quality products using a wood lathe. Um, but unlike other YouTube channels that also focus on wood turning and making products, this channel, as represented by the name Turning on a Dime, this channel is going to be focused on how to make really high quality professional products, but not spending the $8,000 to $12,000 that you would generally see on other channels for like a wood lathe. I know sometimes when you watch these other channels, it appears that you need to buy the really expensive wood lathe if you want to make those high quality products. But that's really not true. You don't have to spend $50 to $250 for a bowl gouge or a skew or one of the other tools that a lot of the other turners use in order to make high quality products. Most of the tools that we're going to be using on this channel are going to run somewhere between $1 and $10. And so I wanted you to understand what we're going to be doing on this channel. It's really just about how can I make really high quality products that can be sold easily in farmers markets, craft fairs, but not have to spend a huge amount of money to do it. Today, we are going to start this channel by introducing a series that I'm going to have that will run from time to time, and I'm calling this series The Fifth Way. There are 4 wood turners on YouTube, and I'm telling you, these guys are fantastic. They are amazing wood turners. So don't take anything that I say as indicating that they are anything but amazing. But they have a series they call 4 Ways. And so each month they present, each one of them, there's 4 of them, and each one of them presents an object, an item that they have made as part of their series. So one month it may be they're all going to make um, a a bowl, or one month they're all going to make a box of some kind. And then they each show you the way they produce that particular item. Well, a couple of months ago, they had as their focus a chess piece, and each one of them presented a chess piece. And so that's why it's called 4 Ways. Well, I'm going to start a series called Fifth Way, in which case we're going to make what they make, only we're going to use very inexpensive materials and products. And so I'll be showing you how you can do that. A couple of, like I said, a couple of months ago, they had chess piece, and I've made lots of chess pieces. And so on this series, we are going to make a fifth way of making a chess piece. Now this chess piece right here is about 8 to 9 inches tall, and this is what we're going to be making. Now, I will tell you also on this channel, I typically don't measure everything out. One of the gentlemen, and I'll talk about him a little bit more in the video. One of the gentlemen in the 4 Ways series, his name is Mike Peace. If you have never seen Mike make things, you need to go over to his channel. I watch his channel regularly, and he is an amazing wood turner. But if you watch Mike, you will very quickly see that Mike, before he starts a project, he has everything measured. He has it all drawn out. All the measurements and everything are just exactly the way he wants it. On this channel, we're not going to be doing quite as much of that. I typically make a three-dimensional model, a model that I'm happy with, and then I use this as the basic outline for what I'm going to make, and therefore most of my products don't ever look exactly the same. So if I make a chess piece, which we're going to on this channel, it's while this is the model, it's not going to look exactly like this because I always try to introduce new ideas and make sure that my products are not ever exactly the same. Now that's not true if you're going to make if I was going to make a chess set, a chessboard with a set of chess pieces. Well, yes, then all of the pawns need to kind of look the same. But if you're just making independent products to have sitting out on a table that you're selling at a craft show, there's a lot more advantage to having slight variations because different people have different opinions on what is good, and so giving them a variety of products um, will tend to help you sell your products as opposed to everyone having the exact same option. So again, on this channel we focus on making products that you could easily sell at a craft show, but doing so on a very, very limited budget. So today, in order to make this, we're going to need a lathe and 6 tools. So let's go over and show you those. So for the lathe, we're going to be using this Grizzly MIDI lathe, M-I-D-I lathe. When I bought this, you could buy it for, I don't remember exactly what I paid for it, but somewhere in the neighborhood of $420. I checked this basic lathe that you can get on Grizzly, from Grizzly, and you can still get this for less than $500. Now, I have purchased an extension which cost me an extra $150 or so. But for most of the things that you would need to make what we're going to be making is just the standard lathe, which is that right there. And so you could get started making high quality professional items for really at or less than $500. These are the 6 tools that we're going to be using on this project. If you look at each one of these, I have made handles for a lot of my tools. Some of my tools I bought with the handles already on there. But every one of these tools is a very low cost tool. Everything from this one right here costing about $1 total to this one right here. This is a carbide tip. Has a carbide tip on it, and this tool cost about $20. Everything else probably cost me somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 to $10. So you could buy every one of these tools for less than $60. Okay, well, I have the wood blank attached. You can see it's a very minimally processed, rough piece of wood. And I'll talk later about how I get these. But it still even has these corners on it that are going to be very difficult to turn away if you don't have a more expensive tool like a spindle roughing gouge. I do not use a spindle roughing gouge most of the time. And so getting rid of these corners is going to require a different process for me. So what I do use, I have simply in my shop, I have a hand planer, and I can get rid of these
corners very efficiently with just the hand planer. So here you can see I'm using that electric hand planer to get rid of these corner pieces, and that's going to help round off this wood blank so that I don't have to use the more expensive roughing gouge. I can just use the spindle gouge that I would typically use. This is the spindle gouge that I will be using. You can see it's not a roughing gouge. The flute is going to be considerably more shallow, and the tool itself is it's just less sturdy. And that's the reason that you really need to round off those corners if you're going to use a spindle gouge. Now, this tool itself cost me probably total about $1. I purchased the metal portion several years ago at a garage sale. I got a collection of about, I don't even remember, 13, 14, 15 gouges for $10. So the metal itself is less than $1. And then I made the handle. And so if you put the entire cost of this tool, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 is really what it cost me for this tool. Be aware, this is not high-speed steel. Um, Most wood turners use high-speed steel, and I do for a lot of my gouges and chisels. I will use high-speed steel, but this is not. That means I'm going to have to sharpen it a lot more in order to make this work. But it will work just fine as long as you keep it sharpened. So again, you don't have to buy expensive wood gouges, wood turning tools. If you are able to find especially the metal part at a place inexpensively, and then just make your own handle, which I will demonstrate how to do that on another video. But you can make the entire tool relatively cheaply. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to turn this block really just into a cylinder, and that will get us to the point that we're ready to make the chest piece. And I'm not going to make you watch the entire process of me turning this into a cylinder. I will just let you see how I'm going to turn this. Do notice that with these smaller lathes, these less expensive lathes, you may get a little bit more vibration. I do have my lathe mounted to this workbench, and so it's on there safely, but it may still have a little bit of vibration, and that's just something you kind of get used to while you are working on these smaller lathes. I'm going to be using a glove, so I'm putting my glove on. If you want to explain to me why that is unsafe, feel free to do so, but I've been using a glove for 20 years and I don't intend on changing at this point. But if it makes you happy to tell me that that's unsafe, feel free to leave that in the comments. I will read it and understand your concern for my safety, and I do appreciate it. So here I'm just what is called riding the bevel, just turning away the flat edges to get a more of a cylinder appearance. And I've got my small tool rest on. I'm going to change this to a larger tool rest so that I can work more of the wood all at the same time. It is not necessary that you buy a larger tool rest, but I will tell you that if you're going to make longer items, such as this chess piece or something like a rolling pin, having a um, larger, wider tool rest does come in handy. Now that I have it all rounded off, I'm going to go back to the smaller tool rest. I don't really need to be working the entire length of the wood. I'm just going to be working smaller projects. So the smaller tool handle will work just fine. All right, I'm going to work on the tenon, so I just need to smooth off this end. And I'm going to use this bowl gouge. Now, this is a high-speed steel bowl gouge. It's still a fairly inexpensive tool. I believe I purchased this tool from, I have to pull my tool rest back just a little bit. It was a little too close. But I purchased this from Savannah. And if I'm remembering right, you can get a kit of Savannah gouges for, I think, about 8 of them for somewhere around $59 or $69. So it's under $10 for the gouge itself. Like I said, it is high-speed steel, so I won't have to do quite as much sharpening as I did with the spindle gouge as I was taking off the flat edges and turning it into the cylinder. I'm just going to continue taking this down until it's smooth enough, and then I'm going to check to make sure that I can get a tenon turned of the size that I need. Now, I am going to mount this onto a chuck. You don't have to use a chuck. You can just mount it between centers, but I'm going to be mounting it onto a chuck, and my chuck needs a tenon that's around 2.3, about 2 1/3 inches. And so I check that this tool is just set for 2.3 inches. And so I check that to get a general idea of what the 2 1/3 inches will be. Some people will mark the end of the wood blank at what the size is and then just turn the wood blank down to the mark. I will do that sometimes. Most of the time, I just eyeball it, see what the 2.3, 2 1/3 inches is, and take the wood down to about that. I'll check it here, and I believe, yeah, it's still a little bit, the tenon's a little bit too large, so I'll take off just a little bit more to get the tenon down to the size that I want. Check it again. I think this time it is, yeah, it's right. So now I know that the tenon is the right size and in terms of diameter, and I'm just going to take a little bit more wood away so that the tenon is a little bit longer. I want it to have enough wood that the chuck can grab onto it. And so I'm just checking that to make sure it's still the diameter that I want. Now I'm going to be moving on to a detailed gouge. Now this detail gouge that I will be using, I have it sharpened to a point. And the reason I have it sharpened to a point like this is because I'm going to be using this detail gouge just right there at the tenon. I want the tenon to be slightly dovetailed because I want the chuck to be able to grab onto that tenon fairly easily, and that detail gouge will help me do that. So now that I have the tenon all set, I'm going to mount it onto the chuck. Now this chuck that I use is a fairly low cost chuck. I'll talk more about that later, but because it's really designed more for a midi lathe than a full-size lathe, that block of wood is really too large for that chuck to hold that block by itself. So I do need to pull up the tailstock to provide some additional support. And now I'm just tightening the chuck. It does have multiple spots where you can tighten it. I have people tell me that, well, they all tighten in the same way. You don't have to do every one of them, but I generally do them all anyway. So I forgot to video the beginning of this turn. All I've done on the part that I didn't video was just set the bottom of the chess piece and just get that established. Now what I'm doing is starting to turn the base of the chess piece. So from time to time, I'll put a picture of the chess piece up in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and I'll just show you the part that I am turning at different times in the video. So you can see where I'm turning right now. I'm just trying to get the base of the chess piece set, and this is going to require that I get down into some pretty tight grooves. So right now I'm just using a bowl gouge, but I will have to switch over a little bit later, and I'm going to have to use that detail gouge again to really get down into those tight spaces. So there's that detail gouge that I am using to clean that up. And so that's going to kind of set the base. Now, the next part that I am going to be turning is the rounded portion just above the base. I'm setting what I would consider, just eyeballing it again, what I consider the center of that rounded part. So I'm rounding off the bottom of the round. This is really just a bead. I will put beads onto a variety of things that I make that will provide a little bit of a decoration, but beads tend to be fairly small. This part that I'm doing here, though, is really just a bead, but it's very large. But you make it the same way. You're just going to round that off on the top and the bottom, and so that's what I've done there. At this point, I'm using a new tool. It is a parting tool, and it's really designed to just take away wood in a particular area so that you can part a wood piece, such as that cylinder wood blank. You can just part it into two. But a lot of times I will use my parting tool to just give a general separation. And so I have used that to separate that large bead from the next part that I am going to be making. So again, I'm just using my bowl gouge, and need a little bit more light. It's a little dark right there, too many shadows, and so I'm just using that bowl gouge to continue to work that area and get a good separation between that large rounded bead and the next object that I will be preparing. The next object that I'm going to be preparing is this section right here, which is a fairly significant, is a pretty good section of the piece, and I just need to mark it off. This is going to be the top. You'll see later that I'll make it a little bit larger than that, but I'm setting that up as the top of this next section, and then I am just removing wood. So I'm just getting wood out of the way using the spindle gouge that I used before. It's the exact same spindle gouge, and I'm just removing wood and really making a concave region on this piece right here. One of the things that you need to keep in mind as you make pieces like this, you can have whatever type of decoration that you want, but one of the things to remember is you need to have the parts of the object, whether you're making a chess piece or a candle holder, but they need to have different diameters. Don't make everything the exact same diameter. The outer edge is the exact same diameter. The concave regions are all the exact same inner diameter. Give a variety of diameter of the wood piece. And so I'm going to be going pretty deep into this wood, not hugely deep, but fairly deep, because I want to give it a distinctive difference between the bead that I had beneath, just beneath it. I want that to be fairly different, so I'm going in fairly deeply on this part. Just going up a little bit higher. I want it to be a little bit longer. Later on, I will take the bottom of the concave and move it a little higher up. Right now, I have the farthest end, the bottom of the concave, fairly in the pretty close in the center. But I'm going to be moving the bottom a little farther up on the piece. All right, so I'm using the parting tool. I've decided I'm going to put a little extra aspect into the area right there on that concave region. And in order to do that, I need to get a little extra separation between that large rounded bead and the beginning of the concave section. And so that's what I was doing with the parting tool. And now I'm using the bowl gouge to just kind of give it a little bit more of a rounded off appearance right there between those two sections of the chess piece. I do want you to notice that in using the tools, I'm not actually moving the handle with my hand. The tool itself is up against the side of my body, and I'm really just moving my body side to side, and that's what is then moving the handle of the tool, and that just really provides a lot more control as you're making these what are somewhat fine adjustments to the piece. And so you can see right here, I'm just putting a little extra concave region that will give a little bit more definition to this section of the piece. There you can see in a little bit better detail how I added that little extra section on the concave region. In order to go into the next section of the piece, I just need to get rid of wood. So I'm back to my spindle gouge, and I just need to remove wood. And so that's all I'm doing here. I know that my spindle gouge is sharp. I'm getting the ribbons off just like I would expect and would want to get, and so I believe I had just sharpened that before I started using it. As I told you, that spindle gouge is not high-speed steel. It has to be sharpened regularly. I probably sharpened that spindle gouge, I don't know, 4 or 5 times on this project. This oak wood really dulls that metal down if it's not high speed steel. Okay, what I'm doing here is I am working on the step up section. You can see in the upper left hand corner, I'm showing you what I'm working on, and it's I'm going to start off with a step up and then a step down. You'll see later on I decide to do away with the step down. Right here I'm just using the bowl gouge to kind of round off that change from the concave region to the steps, step up and step down. So, but as I said earlier, I'm going to eliminate the step down, and you'll see what I do later. But for right now, I'm just sort of outlining the step down. A lot of what I do in making these products is I will just sort of give a rough, I'll just sort of rough it out and see if I like it and make adjustments later on. And so you'll see that I will do that on the step down region. But right now I'm just sort of roughing it out, getting it even so that the step up sections and the step down sections are fairly even in terms of diameter. All right, now I'm going to be moving on to the next section, which is another concave section. It's going to start fairly straight and then angle outward. So what I need to do is I need to get rid of a lot of this wood. I'm using the spindle gouge again. It's probably the best tool for just removing large amounts of wood fairly quickly. Works very well for doing that. You can see the tool is sharp. I've got the wood coming off in the ribbons. So even though it is not a high-speed metal, it still works very well. So now I have fast forwarded a little ways. You can see what I did in that section where it's kind of straight but then angles to a wider diameter. And now I'm again using my parting tool to get rid of some wood to get us down and ready for the next section, which is the first of the little balls on the top of the piece. It's getting pretty tight up here at the top, so once again I'm using my spindle gouge, get rid of some of this wood so that I have a little bit more room to work. That's just part of what you have to do. You have to get rid of a lot of wood that you just don't need. It just gets in the way, and you got to get rid of it. You got to get it out of there so that you can work on the sections that you need to work. All right, so I fast forwarded just a little bit. You can see that the first rounded dome is completed. Now I'm working on the little top knot on the very end. I still need to remove a little bit more wood. I do have to be somewhat careful because I need to leave myself, I generally try to leave myself about a 1/2 inch. I've got to give myself a little bit more light, too many shadows again, but I need to leave myself at least a half an inch there. Otherwise, things start breaking off, and so I need to be careful that I don't take off too much wood off of the end. But I'm just using that parting tool to just get rid of wood that I don't need. Now I can use the parting tool to round that off, or I could use a bowl gouge or that detail gouge. Right now I'm just using the parting tool to kind of give me a rough, just sort of rough out what it's going to look like. And now I'm using the bowl gouge to give the curve of the semicircle that is on the top of the piece. It's getting tight again, so I'm going to have to use the detail gouge to get in there and finish up rounding off this curve of the semicircle. I don't want to part it off completely just yet because I still have more to do. I need to leave a certain amount holding that piece onto the wood disc at the end. But here you can just see I'm curving that over. Now in this, I'm just going to use this scraper. It's a negative rake scraper, and all I did in that case is just smooth a little section out. I will use the scraper to do some more smoothing later. But that basically gives the outline of the basic shape of the chess piece. At this point, it's now coming in and giving slight details where more details are needed. I'll be using the detail gouge. I'll also use my scraper to do that. I'm going to be pulling out this tool for the first time. It's a carbide tip, rounded tip. I can change the tip on this, but I'm using it just to really to just kind of smooth out that little rounded ball up at the top of the piece. And it does a very good job if you're wanting to just just smooth something out. I don't generally use anything like that if I'm doing any major shaping, just to get rid of. But if I'm just going to get rid of some, do some minor touch-ups, I'll sometimes pull out that carbide tip scraper. If you're wanting to know how much that was, that tool was about I think that tool was about $60. It came with 3 parts to it, so it's really the same as having 3 tools. That metal part, you can switch out the metal parts very easily. In, I don't know, 10 seconds or so, you can just switch out the metal parts. And so you really have 3 tools that all work together come together as a single tool. So that's about a $20 tool that I'm using. Some people do not use carbide tip tools at all. They just stay away from them. I use it occasionally if I'm just going to do just some fine smoothing out of an aspect of a piece. I'm also using that rounded carbide tip to put a little bit more of a groove right here at the top of the piece. You can see on the image at the bottom right hand corner, I decided to put a little bit of a rounded off groove there all the way around the dome of the piece, and that's what I'm doing at this point in the video. I'm just putting that groove in, and I'm using the rounded carbide tip to do that. You can also see now I am using that carbide tip to just do some really fine shaping of the piece. Again, I'm not doing any major changing at this point. I'm just coming through and smoothing some things out. So really all I'm doing now is I'm going back, starting at the top of the piece, the end where you had the little dome, and now I'm just making some fine adjustments. And this is really the way I do a lot of my pieces. I will get them roughed out so that I can see the basic shape that I'm going to have, and then I start seeing things that I don't really like, and I will come back and adjust the shape slightly. And so that's what I am doing. I'm just making some final adjustments. You can see I'm using that negative rake scraper again, and I am just sort of smoothing out this one little section of the chest piece. If you don't start off with dimensions all planned out perfectly, then a lot of times this is what you do, and this is really the way I work with my wood lathe. I have a tendency to have a general idea of what I'm going to do, and then as I continue to move through the piece, I make adjustments, I smooth things out, I remove other sections, and I would encourage you to try some of that. There is an absolutely fantastic woodworker, does lathe work. His name is Mike Peace. He has a YouTube channel. If you haven't ever seen him, I would encourage you to go look at his work. Mike has everything planned out. I don't have no idea what he has done in his career. Maybe I don't know. I in my mind, I always envision him as an engineer, because when Mike starts working on a piece, he has it all drawn. He has every dimension worked out to perfection. I just don't work that way. I have a basic shape. You saw the model of the chess piece that I was working from, and I just get the basic shape, and then I start making changes as I just feel that changes need to be made. So here you can see I am making an adjustment. I'm eliminating the step down portion that I had initially put in. If you remember, I put in step up sections and then step down sections, and I'm starting to change that entirely with a completely new shape. I don't really like it. I'm trying different things that I can find that I like, and I haven't found anything. I didn't like the step down. I didn't like it rounded over. So now I'm trying a new idea where I'm going to straighten it out. So it's still going to step down, but it's just going to step down one time, and then I'm going to put a V-shape groove inside of that step down. And that's what I will end up going with. I'll end up just having a one step down section with a groove that is dug into that one step down section. You can kind of see that step down section in the image on the bottom right hand corner of the video. You can see where I ended up just turning that into a step down section. All right, I'm just coming back, working from one end to the other. I'm just coming back and smoothing things out. I am working on that new little concave section that I initially really didn't have, but I decided to put into the piece, really to make it a little bit different than the model. I always try to make my pieces slightly different. When I have someone buy a piece from me, I want them to know that it's very unique. I don't try to make every single chess piece or every single bowl or every single anything exactly the same, so that they know when they buy a piece from me, it is unique and no one's going to have a chess piece in this case that is exactly like theirs. And so that's the reason I went ahead and put that that extra concave, little small. All right, so you can see I'm still working on the what I'm calling that giant bead, and really just smoothing it out. I'm using that negative rake scraper to just smooth that out. Also, you can see that I am still changing that concave region. Instead of having the deepest part of the concave section in the middle, I wanted to have a little more gradual a grade going into the concave, and then coming back out at the top, I wanted to come back out a little bit steeper. This is really what I do whenever I get closer to having a piece the way I want it. I look at it, I feel it. I'm feeling for imperfections, rough spots, and so that's what that is all about. I'm also coming back to that same step down section. I'm still not happy with that. I ended up going with just a little deeper step down section. So it started off as being somewhat shallow. And again, like I told you, you really need to try to have different depths. And so I went with a deeper depth. Now I'm going to get started on sanding, and I do not have any type of air purification. So, I mean, my shop is connected outside, and you can see the door is open to it, but I don't have a vacuum system, and so I wear a mask. And so I showed you what the mask looks like. I would encourage you to wear a mask when you are doing any type of fine sanding. You do want to keep as much of that fine sanding dust out of your lungs. It can cause a problem. One thing, if you are allergic to it, it can cause a problem, but long term, it can cause a fairly significant problem with your lungs. So you can see all of that sanding dust that is coming off. You can also see that I'm touching it. I'm touching the wood piece as I'm sanding it, feeling for imperfections, knowing when it's sanded enough. Does it need more sanding? And so I use the touch to determine that. Once I get it sanded, and it doesn't generally take long to sand an item if you've gone through and you've smoothed it out with the tools. Uh, 3 to 5 minutes of sanding, and that's really about all you need. Then what I do is I use a little bit of denatured alcohol and rub that denatured alcohol onto the wood piece. Now this does a couple of things. First, it takes off some of the that fine sanding dust, but it also will dehydrate those wood fibers right there on the surface of your piece. And as it dehydrates those fibers will start to stick out just a little bit. In fact, once you put that denatured alcohol on there and let it dry, you can feel the wood. The wood will have a rougher appearance. And then what I do is I come back with a 320 or maybe 400 grit sandpaper, and I will do a very fine sanding, final sanding. Again, I'm feeling it to make sure I know when all of those little fibers that are now sticking up, when they've all been sanded away, and it doesn't take much. You can see I'm sanding very quickly, but just get rid of those fibers. And at that point, it's very smooth. What I'm going to do, I've decided to seal this with a lacquer. Lacquer is not something that is food safe, but this is not a bowl or something that would be used with food. And so I'm going to cover it with a lacquer. You saw that I put a little cloth down. I generally put very thin layers of lacquer. If I use a lacquer, it'll be a very thin layer, but I still want to do what I can to prevent anything from dripping onto the bed of the lathe. And so that little cloth helps to prevent anything from getting onto the lathe. I will end up doing 2 layers. So I will do 1 layer, then I will be finished for the day. I'll let that dry, set up overnight. Then I will do a very, very light sanding. I don't do much sanding after it dries, and then I will come back and do a second layer of lacquer, and this is what you end up with. So what you have there is after the second lacquer layer. At this point, I still need to sand the surface of that lacquer so that I can get a very, very nice shine on this. And I use a friction paste, which is basically a sanding paste, to get this last shine, this last sanding on there. It's a paste. I have a recipe that I make. I'll go over the recipe that I use for this kind of sanding paste in another video. Once I have that sanding paste completely covering the entire project, then I turn the lathe back on, probably about 200, 300 RPM, and just very lightly sand, just use that same cloth to wipe that sanding paste onto the surface of the object. And what that'll do is that will just do some fairly fine sanding. I don't do that for very long, nor do I push very hard. I don't apply very much pressure. All I'm doing is mainly just spreading that sanding paste out evenly, and in the process you'll get some sanding that will be done. Then I take a clean cloth and I'll turn the lathe up a little bit higher, and all I'm doing at this point is I'm just trying to remove the sanding paste. That's that friction paste. I'm just trying to get that off. Now, in the process of getting that off, rubbing that off, it's going to do the final sanding for me. And so that's a relatively clean cloth. And again, I'm just wiping the sanding paste off of there, that friction paste off of there, and you can see I feel the item and make sure that the friction paste has been removed. So I'm just wiping off that friction paste and getting a final very, very fine sanding. I'm going to say that this is probably equivalent to about I'm going to say 400 grit. Now, I don't really have to do anything other than this. That friction paste has some beeswax in it, so it does produce a fairly nice shine on the object after you have, removed all the friction off of there. And I'm just feeling it to make sure that it's been removed. You can see it shines fairly well. I generally put a wax coating on there. I use this cloth so often with this wax material that it's pretty much just saturated, and so I just take the cloth, rub it on there. Now I do turn that up. I turn the lathe up pretty high, and I'm pushing on the object with quite a bit of pressure, because I need to have enough friction that it melts that wax. And but it doesn't take very long. You just basically you're just waxing the chest piece and finishing it up so that it has a nice shine. At this point, I'm basically finished. What I need to do is part the chest piece off from the wood. So I'm using my parting tool, and you can see that once I part the piece off, that's what I end up with. So it's a little bit rough on the top and the bottom where I had to part that off. And I just do some minor sanding. I don't do anything major, but it's smooth. But I'm not trying to make it look perfect on especially the bottom. Now you'll see the top, I spend a lot more time, and you can't even really tell at the top where I did that final sanding. But on the bottom, you can see I'm not trying to make it as perfect as the rest of the piece. It's on the bottom. It doesn't show. And there is some discussion among wood turners. Do you need to do anything on the bottom, or can you just leave the bottom of these objects completely rough? I'm kind of in the middle. I do a considerable amount of sanding on the bottom, but I don't try to make it perfect either. So I kind of take the middle ground on that. The only thing I do is I put a little symbol. That CG is the symbol for my name, the date 2025, and then I always put the type of wood that that I'm using, and this is oak. And after I finish sanding the little knob on the top, I put just a very light lacquer coating on it. I'll buff it up just a little bit. Pretty much, I do just enough so that you can't tell that that is where I had to part off the object. once I have burned the information into the bottom, then again, I put a little bit of lacquer onto the bottom, buff it up just a little bit, and I finish up the bottom that way. Doing this on the bottom will seal the end grain in case the piece still needs to dry out a little bit. This wood's pretty dry, so I don't think it needs to dry anymore, but just in case it does, sealing that end grain on the bottom will slow that drying process down and will inhibit any warping or cracking that could occur. And for the most part, I don't get any cracking this way. So this is what the object looks like. Ended up very shiny, and I'm very pleased with the appearance of the object. You can see the information that is burned into the bottom and ready for sale. You can also see it's about 9 inches tall. That's what it ended up being. And I also want you to see it next to the model. As you can see, it's not the exact same item as the model. It's similar, and you can see that the object that we made, the chess piece that we made, somewhat resembles the model, but each one of my pieces, unless they come in a set, like I said, if you want to make a whole set of chess pieces, well then yes, the pawns need to be identical. But unless you're doing something like that, I have found that it's a lot better in terms of selling objects, selling crafts, that you provide some variety. And so that's what we did. So that's what it ended up. I appreciate you visiting the channel. I hope you will come back, and we will be making other objects over time. I can tell you that the next object that we'll be making is a bowl. I need to make a bowl for a gift, so we're going to be making a bowl on the next video, and you can see how that is done. We will again be using either free or very inexpensive materials and equipment, tools. So come back and join us on the next video as we make this bowl. Hey, if you liked this video, I'd appreciate it if you would hit the like button, and would also appreciate it if you would subscribe, and that way you will get notified every time a new video comes out. Thanks again for visiting, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.